Russia's President Vladimir Putin announced on Wednesday that his country and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, also known to us as North Korea, have signed a strategic partnership which they said will serve as a roadmap for future cooperation in all spheres, from cultural and tourist ties to trade, economic relations, and security. Putin called it truly a breakthrough. For more on that, we go to Moscow to speak with analyst Mark Sleboda. Mark, what just happened and what does it mean going forward?
Putin's trip to Pyongyang, to North Korea, a reciprocal trip. Last year, Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, visited Russia. He came to Vladivostok or outside Vladivostok, and particularly he came and toured Russia's Vostochny Cosmodrome. It's a space launch platform in the east, its new one. And that followed, what followed was word that Russia was providing assistance to North Korea's space program, in particular putting high-tech reconnaissance satellites into orbit. Of course, any help with a space launch program can also be considered dual use for missile technology, because it is largely similar, of course, putting a satellite into orbit and launching a ballistic missile. There's obviously differences, but similar. And according to the Western press, this was in return for North Korea supplying Russia with additional munitions for the conflict in Ukraine. Now, we already know that Russia is outproducing all of NATO put together in artillery shells and many other types of munitions critical for this conflict by some 3 to 7 times, depending on whether you're reading the Washington Post or CNN or the New York Times. But in a land-based artillery-heavy land-centric artillery-heavy war of attrition, you can never have too many artillery shells. And reportedly, North Korea was also helping with rockets for multiple launch rocket systems, possibly multiple launch rocket systems themselves, and ballistic missiles. Now, North Korea and Russia officially denied this, but it seems fairly credible to me. And of course, it comes on the heel. This is depicted as desperation on Russia's part, despite the admittance that Russia's outproducing all of NATO put together on these things. But it comes on the heels of South Korea providing Ukraine via the United States with millions of rounds of artillery shells. This was reported by the Wall Street Journal in multiple articles at the time, citing anonymous officials from both governments. This was almost entirely the Kiev regime's ammunition artillery supply for their failed 2023 NATO proxy grand summer offensive. They were using South Korean artillery shells. In fact, the Wall Street Journal reports that South Korea in 2023 supplied more artillery shells to Ukraine via the United States, via this fig leaf, than all of Europe combined. So fairly significant. And Russia warned at the time, don't do this. You've already sided against us with sanctions, agreeing to Western sanctions. And if you supply munitions, then, you're siding against us and there will be repercussions. Well, the new South Korean leader likes to sing Bye-Bye Miss American Pie with Joe Biden and his complete U.S. tool and vassal. So, of course, he went ahead and did it. And now we see the repercussions. And Putin went to Pyongyang with a full head, his foreign minister, his defense minister, his transport minister, his health minister, the head of the Russian space agency, Roscosmos, and numerous other officials. And we discover that they have signed a comprehensive new strategic partnership deal that includes all spheres of activity: economic, cultural, scientific, transport, tourism, but most importantly, security. And on top of what we can come to normally expect from a strategic partnership, this is obviously done at least in part in response to all the Western countries citing strategic partnership relationships with Ukraine, provide for military equipment transfer, technology transfer, intelligence sharing, training, joint exercises, and the like. But now we find out that this goes much further, much further. And we have had revealed on the heels of the trip that the strategic partnership arrangement between Russia and North Korea includes a mutual aid pact in case of aggression against
Article
either
5.
party. This is Article 5, baby. This is NATO Article 5. Now, it doesn't specifically say we will go to war with whoever you are at war against. But then again, neither does Article 5. Article 5 in NATO actually only says that the other members of the alliance must act. Doesn't say what they must do. So by those terms, although the Russian government isn't yet calling it this, this is a Russian-North Korean alliance, right? This is something they've denied. North Korea, I have seen reports that Kim Jong-un actually used the word. And I think we can broadly assume that whatever relationship Russia and North Korea have, this is also extended to China as well. So, although, they say that this isn't directed against third parties, we're not interested in geopolitical blocks, blah, blah, blah. Yes, Diplo speak. Meanwhile, geopolitical blocks on the other side of the aisle are certainly interested in North Korea and Russia. So whatever their protests to the contrary, we now see the formalization of a military bloc in Northeast Asia between Russia and North Korea, and I think we can assume that China is also included, and this really changes things. Obviously, the U.S. cannot conduct attacks against North Korea now if it would mean war with Russia. Direct war with Russia. I mean, besides North Korea's now nuclear strategic deterrent, because North Korea is now a nuclear power as well, with a growing nuclear arsenal. So Putin just certainly changed the name of the game. And I think that this is both an asymmetric response to the West's escalations in Ukraine, but it is also an attempt to stabilize the security situation against the hegemon in the North Pacific, Northeast Asia.
Yeah, I see that in the same context as the recent, more for show than anything, but the recent visit to Havana's port by a Soviet, a Russian nuclear submarine and a small escort set. Also, NATO, the U.S., whomever is, behind the screen that particular day, had no appetite whatsoever for Russia reaching an agreement with Belarus to position some of Russia's missiles on Belarusian territory, claiming that it was a violation of the the non-proliferation treaty, when the U.S. has been doing that since the treaty was signed by saying, well, these are American bases in Poland and Germany and everywhere else. And so
the U.S. has nuclear weapons, nuclear gravity bombs in Germany, Italy, and Turkey, and several other countries, Netherlands, Belgium, in Europe. So that was a direct response. So Russia is playing a quid pro quo game geopolitically. And the Russian rhetoric, Putin is usually pretty measured, pretty pragmatic, and calculated with his speech. But in an address, an article written for the North Korean Daily, he said, Russia has continuously supported and will support the DPRK and the heroic Korean people in their struggle against the treacherous, dangerous, and aggressive enemy in their fight for independence, identity, and the right to freely choose their development path. He also said that Russia and North Korea would work together against the collective West's attempts to prevent the emergence of a multipolar world order based on justice, mutual respect for sovereignty, non-interference in others' political affairs.
Yep. Yeah, we will continue to oppose the imposition of strangling sanctions, which the West has turned into a tool of maintaining its hegemony. Now, this is an interesting angle, too, because clearly the effort to isolate DPRK by the West has been as intensive as the effort to isolate Cuba, and as effective over the years. A cooperation agreement, at this level with Russia, and similarly one with China, now leaves the U.S. into trying to do long-arm sanctions. They're like running out of places to sanction, and the sanctions that they have most directed at these two nations in particular are, they're starting to collapse in the face of this multipolarity.
The sanctions have failed, of course, with their intended purpose, and all they have, the blowback from them, is the creation of an alternative economic and financial order through BRICS and other mechanisms that will soon be entirely outside of the U.S. control, a parallel set of global economic institutions. That is what the trajectory of BRICS is.
And, the history here, of course, is interesting with the post-war period, with some contradictions, of course, but the 38th parallel ended up being as far south as the Soviet army came at the end of World War II, and that is the part that, in essence, became an independent country. The South is, in essence, a successor. The U.S. is a successor to the Japanese occupation, and the people on that peninsula, if no one else in the world is, are very aware of these two different situations.
Yes, and Putin brought that up, that it was the Soviet Union that liberated North Korea from Japanese military occupation in 1945. And the Soviet Union that was the first to recognize the North Korean government, the DPRK, assisted them in the Korean War against the U.S. and helped rebuilt North Korea after the U.S.'s genocidal bombing campaign, which knocked every building higher than one story down, essentially bombing North Korea into the Stone Age. So long history of cooperation there.
All right, we'll talk with you next week, and we'll be keeping an eye on this. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.